welcome to the Here We Go podcast. I am your host, Trent Ging. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my reactions to Cutdown Day. So obviously, yesterday was the day that all teams had to get down to their 53-man roster, or at least the initial 53-man roster. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, are there any surprise moves that I saw from what we saw in the final 53-man roster? Do I expect more moves going into this thing? So I'm going to dive right into number one. The surprise cut that I thought actually took place was Kyron Johnson. I thought he had played well enough to make this team. I was surprised they didn't keep a fourth outside linebacker, but I also understand why they've done what they've done. Clearly, DeMarvin Leal has looked like a totally different player this year than what he's looked like in the previous two seasons. Even as a rookie, he was not playing at this level, which is expected. I mean, he was a rookie. But last year, there was an obvious drop-off, an obvious decline, and he just didn't look like a guy you were really even going to keep around on the team, which is why he wasn't wearing a helmet for a large part of that back part of the season. This year is very different. He slimmed down, and clearly either his offseason routine was much better, the conditioning is there, he looks more explosive, maybe he just wasn't comfortable playing at the weight he was at last year. But slimming down to 275, 270 pounds, whatever it is, looks like it's done wonders for DeMarvin Leal. And I think because he was still able to play inside and he's also able to play more on the outside, he brings enough position versatility, which I generally hate that term, but he really truly seems to be fitting that term in a different way than most guys that Tomlin try to force into that role. He does seem to bring more position versatility to be able to handle the workload of both being an interior defensive lineman as well as now the fourth outside linebacker. And let's be honest here. That fourth outside linebacker is nothing more than a guy on paper because he's not going to play very many snaps. Nick Herbig's an absolute stud. He's a monster. You're going to get that guy on the field. As a matter of fact, I think this team, and I've said this before, I think this team is going to manufacture ways to get him on the field, even with Alex and TJ being on the field already. He's earned that right. He's a special talent. This guy could probably start for a number of teams in the league, maybe half the teams in the league, maybe more than half the teams in the league. It's just not a guy that you want to have hanging around the bench. You want him on the field, and I really think they're going to find ways to get Herbig on the field as much as possible. So the outside linebacker 4 isn't going to be a guy who's really more than just a full-time special teamer. So I totally understand the move from that standpoint. I was surprised that two players made the team. Logan Lee and Jalen Elliott are on the initial 53-man roster. Now, Jalen Elliott, I think he made the team primarily because Ryan Watts has been lost for the year. Quite unfortunate because I thought Ryan Watts has played much better than a lot of us had anticipated, myself especially. He was always a guy who, when I first did the safety room breakdown, I had said was extremely talented. He's very, very athletic. He just could never put it together. And he still hasn't put it together. But you have to admire the fact that he's changing positions. And he's done enough to really start turning a lot of heads in this organization to say this guy actually probably could have made the 53-man roster. But he's lost for the season. It's very unfortunate. However, he's going to be able to get some work in watching guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, Damontae Kazee, and start to understand that safety role better. And he's going to come back stronger next year. I really believe that based on what we've seen so far this year. So Elliott's the guy. Now, I don't think Elliott ends up on the 53-man roster. He's on the initial roster after the cuts, but I do expect the Steelers to make some moves. Elliott's also been a guy who's been around this organization for a while. He's been in and out for a few years. Like, he's been here, he's get cut. He's been here, he got cut. You know, we've picked him up off the practice squad to bring him up a couple of times. He's been kind of hanging around, and always has been kind of that fringe guy, but has never been a guy who's actually made the full 53-man roster for an entire season. Unfortunately for him, I don't think that's going to happen either this time around. And I'll explain why in a minute. Logan Lee is the guy I'm truly shocked has made this team. Now, he does play at about the same playing weight. I think he's slightly smaller than DeMarvin Leal. But I think DeMarvin Leal plays stronger than what Logan Lee does right now. Strength was not a huge upside for him coming into the draft process. Actually, it was one of his deficiencies. So not only is he playing at a lower play weight at 270, but he is also not strong at 270. I have always looked at him as more of a project type of guy. He comes from Iowa. Iowa produces some really good talent, especially across that defensive line. They're an offensive line, defensive line, and tight end factory for the NFL. I do think there's upside to Logan Lee because he's an athletic guy. But, I mean, I saw him at least for a snap or two playing at nose tackle in the third preseason game. I'm like, they're just throwing bodies on the field right now. He's not a guy they're even looking at for the roster. And then, to my surprise, he's on the initial roster. Unfortunately, I think he's a guy they're stashing on the roster right now, knowing they're going to make moves, and then they're going to try to get him to the practice squad. I think he and Elliott are going to be in very similar positions. I think they're both guys that are practice squad candidates once they make additional moves. I don't see Logan Lee sticking around on this 53-man roster. I'm not even sure he makes it to week 1 on the 53-man roster. I just don't see him getting called up to dress for a game this entire year. And it's because I think there's some intriguing names out there from Cut Down Day from other teams that our team will and probably should be looking to add. Now, one name that's intriguing to me is Armon Watts. He played very well for us last year. Limited role, limited reps, brought a lot of pass rush upside for a guy who was playing so sparingly. Now, with the emergence of Keanu Benton's pass rush, also with the team showing a lot of faith right now in DeMarvin Leal, I'm not sure they're going to target him, but I think they should. I think he's a clear upgrade over even just looking at a guy like Dean Lowry. I think Armon Watts is a better player than Dean Lowry. I would take him all day. Lowry's more of a run stuffer. Watts is known more as a pass rusher. I just think Watts is a better player all around. We'll see if the team actually does target a guy like that. But for a guy who showed he's played well in the system, Tomlin likes bringing guys back that are familiar with the system. I'm intrigued by what maybe they do there if they try to go get a guy like that. But again, they seem to have so much faith and confidence right now and DeMarvin Leal, then it's very possible that he's just the primary backup at fourth inside linebacker and defensive end. And they're just going to roll with him. And he may even see some time in the pass rush situations when Cam Hayward needs a breather. So he's a guy that's intriguing. The guy that I really want this team to target is Noah Brown. Noah Brown is a guy I've talked about numerous times. He's had a disappointing career so far in the NFL. Let's put that out there first and foremost. But what you saw from him last year in that Houston offense is the exact same thing we could ask of a wide receiver 2 here in the Pittsburgh offense. They are not going to be a focal point in the passing game. So we do not need this guy to be a go-to type of receiver. When you need a play on third down, you're looking at George Pickens, you're looking at Pat Freiermuth. You're not looking at the wide receiver 2, which is why I've argued against Brandon Ayuk from the beginning. Noah Brown is a good run blocker. He's 227 pounds. He's 6'4". He brings size. I'm so tired of seeing 5'10", 5'8", 5'11", and 174-pound guys on our roster because we've got 3 of them. You don't need 3 of the exact same player, which is what we have in Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, and Calvin Austin III. Based on what our roster looks like, I would pick up Noah Brown and I would dump Calvin Austin. That's not what they're going to do. They would dump Scotty Miller. I would dump Calvin Austin III because I think Scotty Miller has shown more right now than Austin has. The problem is the team drafted Austin, not Miller. They're going to ride with the guy that they drafted. But Noah Brown's going to bring a different body type. He was one of the highest yard per catch guys in the league last year. He can stretch the field vertically with that size and his frame. I think he's a guy the defense has to respect. Van Jefferson's not going to beat anyone. Despite the fact he does have good speed, he just is not a deep threat. He can't beat one-on-one coverage. A 6'4", 227-pound receiver makes you pay more attention than what a guy like Van Jefferson does. At 6'1" or whatever he is, and I think maybe 190, 195, it's a different style of player that you have to pay attention to. I think Noah Brown, because he's a good blocker and Van Jefferson is not, would bring a different element to this offense. I think the team should target that guy, and I think people will be upset at first, but once they see him playing, they will understand why I'm saying what I'm saying right now. Because he would fit seamlessly into our offense, especially for the things that Arthur Smith is going to ask and demand of that wide receiver 2 position. And even if you wanted to go after somebody because the gunner situation's such a mess right now, honestly, I wouldn't mind going after Noah Brown and bringing back Miles Boykin to be the gunner. And just dump Scotty Miller and Calvin Austin. I don't care if we have a guy to return punts. I mean, the average return in the NFL is like 10 yards anyway. If you get a guy who gets 7 yards, is it that big a deal? I think gunner is way more important when it comes to field position than a punt returner. It's just my opinion. I mean, people can argue it, and their argument will be valid. That's fine. But in my opinion, a gunner in the NFL is more important than a punt returner in the NFL. They just don't have their hands on the ball, so you don't notice them the same. I don't know who else you would put back at punt returner, to be quite frank with you. But I would still make the moves. That's just me. I also not only anticipate, but I fully expect this team is going to bring in a cornerback. They cut Thomas Graham, which leaves Beanie Bishop as the sole slot corner on the team. That either says the world about the team's confidence in Beanie Bishop, or it says they're going to make a move sooner rather than later. This is where I said I believe Elliott gets kicked off the roster because I fully expect this team to pick up a corner, and we might see a very familiar face. Patrick Peterson is probably on speed dial with Omar Khan right now. They're probably going to test the waters on some of these guys that got cut, see if there's a guy they like better than Peterson. And if they can't find the guy they want, we might just find Patrick Peterson right back here in Pittsburgh, and he may be the slot, and he may be that safety depth also, which to some degree makes some sense. I'm not sure anybody's going to be thrilled with the move, but the issues we saw at the outside corner spot last year with him can be covered up in the inside to some degree, because you are usually working in shorter, more confined spaces when you're in the slot. The problem is, with his speed, can his intelligence and understanding of the game help him with the lack of speed that he provides on these short, quick, like slant routes and things of that nature? Can he jump some of those routes still at his age? That might be something to be seen still. I don't know. But I could see a realistic scenario where this thing starts pushing close to week 1 and Patrick Peterson is on this team. But again, you've got Cam Sutton in the waiting, so it may not make a ton of sense from Patrick Peterson's standpoint, because what's your role beyond week 9? So that's why I think they're going to test the free agent waters first and see if they have a guy they like that could work in there with Beanie Bishop, or possibly ahead of Beanie Bishop if they see somebody they really like. And there's a couple of names out there, but I fully expect they're going to add someone to that room, because the depth at cornerback isn't great. Corey Trice looks good, but again, he's already hurt, and we haven't even made it to week 1. He's got an injury history. On top of that, Darius Rush hasn't looked great. He's had a couple of games where he's okay, but the Buffalo game wasn't very good, and it's the only game we've seen him against starters for longer than a series or two. So he played better his last game, but again, it's against Detroit's backups. How much do you take that into consideration? I think they need depth. I've said it a number of times before. There's a reason Darius Rush got cut from 2 different teams. So they may want somebody like Patrick Peterson that brings an inside-outside versatility to them. That's the other reason why I was bringing his name up. Should be really interesting to see where this goes. But I do expect them to add. And obviously, you don't need to add anything else on that defense. I think it's less than a 50% chance that they add to the defensive line group. I think that group's probably going to be the group that goes into the regular season. I was not surprised at all that they kept Mark Robinson based on the way he played in preseason. That dude on special teams was an absolute monster. And he played fairly well on defense as well. I mean, even in coverage at times, he had some decent coverage plays too. So I'm not sure he's ever going to develop into a guy that you are really going to want to see on the field outside of maybe a Cleveland or Baltimore game where you know it's just going to be downhill, hard-nosed football, and you just need that thumper type guy to help you out. I can see him rotating in on those games. But he's really going to be a more of a core special teams type guy, similar to what you view Miles Killebrew as. You don't necessarily want to see him on defense, but man, do you want to see that guy playing special teams for you, because he brings something to the table. So I think the real move on defense is going to be in that slot cornerback position. Maybe somebody who brings inside-outside versatility if they can find the right guy, or it's going to be Patrick Peterson. I think that we could look at the offense. I've seen somebody throw out there they may look at a running back. I disagree. Jaylen Warren's talking about being ready to go week 1. I don't think you're going to bring back a running back in that case. I do think they're going to try to put Jonathan Ward on the practice squad. And if they need somebody, he is every bit of what they would want to have to call up. So I don't think they need to go looking for other guys, because you're not going to have room on your practice squad. You're not going to keep 2 running backs around, or not likely. So the wide receiver room is the only obvious option there. Do they look at any interior offensive line? Do they roll with McCollum? Maybe. Maybe they look at a guy who's Stromberg, who got cut, who's a center who was drafted last year. Maybe they view him as a guy who's a better fit with more upside to be the backup center. That's a move I could see the team looking at. But I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of room to work, because I think they're comfortable with Spencer Anderson being a swing guy, both as a guard and as a tackle. So I'm not sure that they add there either. But I don't think there were a ton of surprises necessarily. Like I said, Logan Lee and Elliott were the 2 guys that I was a little shocked at, but I don't foresee them ending up on the 53-man roster, because I do think the team makes some moves. And I think those moves kick them off. And I think they're guys who they want to kind of more or less stash away on the 53 right now, so other teams start filling their roster with the guys they want. And then we look to put those guys into the practice squad. I think that's where they're going with that. So, but yeah, that's my initial reactions for right now. I'll do another recording tomorrow. Colin and I are planning to go live. I think we're going to have it scheduled out here for sure today, but we should have it going. It looks like Friday at 8. Be sure to tune into that, because we're going to talk about some more of this stuff in detail. As always, I hope you like, share, subscribe. Give me some feedback. Give me some content that you want me to cover. If there's things that I'm not covering that you'd like me to go over. Hope you all have a great day. Enjoy.